Well, hello and welcome to the audio magazine. What you're listening to is a collection of some of my written articles taken from the church newsletter and rendered in audio form. I know as people go about their day, often they don't have time to read things, but as they're waiting for the bus or walking to and from work, it's quite nice to have an audio file to listen to. So that is what you will be listening to now, a collection taken from some of the recent church newsletters. I hope you enjoy. King Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar was king of Babylon from around 605 to 562 BC, and he was one of the most important rulers of the Neo-Babylonian Empire and a renowned builder. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which he constructed for his wife, was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Under his rule and leadership, the Neo-Babylonian Empire became one of the most powerful kingdoms in the ancient world, and their capital city, the city of Babylon, grew into a formidable and awesome place. In the Bible, Nebuchadnezzar is one of the best-known Old Testament villains. He twice conquered Jerusalem, destroyed Solomon's temple, and took many Jews captive. His conquests initiated the period of Jewish history known as the Babylonian captivity or the Babylonian exile, which lasted about 70 years. King Nebuchadnezzar is mentioned in 8 books of the Bible: Jeremiah, 2 Kings, 1 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, and Daniel. A series of tablets known as the Babylonian Chronicle supports some of the Old Testament narratives surrounding him, but it stops recording in 594 BC, before his second invasion and the destruction of the temple and the Babylonian captivity, and many of the other events recorded in the Old Testament. The ancient Jewish Roman historian Josephus fills in the dates of some of these events, but we don't have the other ancient text to corroborate him. So historians generally believe that King Nebuchadnezzar was a prominent Babylonian ruler, but that many of the details surrounding him have been embellished or blended in with legend, making it difficult to discern exactly how much we know about this famous king. Did you know the Bible was written in 3 languages? Those languages are Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. Most of the Old Testament was written in Hebrew. A few passages of the Old Testament were written in Aramaic. You can find these in Ezra and Daniel. The New Testament was written mostly in Koine Greek, Common Greek. This was the language commonly spoken at the time. The Bible, in its original languages, is about 611,000 words long. But this, of course, does not correspond to your English or whatever language Bible you are reading today. There are good reasons for this. Firstly, when translating the Bible from its original languages, translators tend to use more words to get across the original author's point. And secondly, different translations treat word passages differently, which results in a variation in word counts from Bible version to Bible version. But it is interesting, though, to think that God's revelation to us, the most important book in history, whilst longer than Herman Melville's Moby Dick, is nowhere near as long as J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter saga. In case you were wondering, all of the book word counts added together gives a total for the Harry Potter book series at a little over 1 million words. The shortest book of the Bible is 3 John. You can read 3 John in about 1 minute. It comprises 219 words in the original Greek. In the New King James Version in English, it comprises 310 words. The book right before it, 2 John, is the second shortest book of the Bible. It contains 245 words in the original Greek. Heroes of the Faith. William Tyndale, 1494 to 1536. William Tyndale was a 16th century Bible translator and theologian. He is best known for producing the first English translation of the Bible from the original Greek and Hebrew. Decades after Tyndale's death, King James commissioned 47 Bible scholars to produce an authoritative English translation of the Bible. They consulted existing English Bibles, most of which were based on Tyndale's work, including Tyndale's own translation. In 1611, the King James Bible was published. The vast majority of the New Testament wording comes directly from William Tyndale's translation. Early life. William Tyndale was born in 1494 in a small village in Gloucestershire, England. In his early 20s, he enrolled at Oxford University, where he studied for about 9 years, earning a BA and an MA. He was an excellent student and became fluent in 8 languages: English, French, Spanish, German, Italian, Greek, Hebrew, and Latin. This God-given ability for both contemporary and biblical languages made him an excellent translator. An English Bible. By the time Tyndale was born, English Bible translations had been illegally circulating for about 100 years. In 1523, Tyndale tried and failed to get authorization from the church to translate the Bible into English. Realizing it was futile in England, he left for Europe in order to translate it without authorization. He went to Germany, possibly settling in Wittenberg. In 1526, Tyndale published a complete English translation of the New Testament. It was not well received by the church. His Bibles were publicly burned, and Tyndale was declared a heretic. What made Tyndale's Bible special? It is true that English Bible translations existed long before William Tyndale was born. However, they had 2 big problems. Firstly, they were translated from the Latin Vulgate, not the original Greek and Hebrew. Secondly, they were very rigidly literal, which made them difficult to read and understand. Tyndale's Bible, on the other hand, relied upon the original languages and was rendered in a way that meant ordinary, untrained people could read and understand God's word. Betrayed by a friend. After finishing the New Testament, Tyndale began work on the Old Testament. During this time, he befriended a man named Henry Phillips, who had recently gambled away most of his father's money. Henry was one of the only people Tyndale allowed to see his writings. In 1535, Henry betrayed Tyndale and handed him over to Belgian soldiers, who threw him in prison and charged him with heresy. After a months-long process, the church stripped Tyndale of his priesthood, condemned him as a heretic, and condemned him to death. Burned at the stake. On October the 6th of 1536, William Tyndale was executed. He was tied to a stake, strangled with a noose, and then burned alive. His last words, as recorded by John Foxe in his Books of Martyrs, were, "Lord, open the King of England's eyes." God would answer his prayer. The answered prayer. 2 years after Tyndale's death, King Henry VIII ordered that the Bible of Miles Coverdale was to be used in every church in England. The Coverdale Bible was largely based on Tyndale's work. Then in 1539, Tyndale's own edition of the Bible became officially approved for printing. Tyndale's translation inspired the great translations that followed, including the Great Bible in 1539, the Geneva Bible of 1560, the Bishop's Bible of 1568, the Douay Rheims Bible of 1582 to 1609, and the Authorized or King James Version of 1611. Amazingly, an analysis of the King James Bible shows that Tyndale's words account for 84% of the New Testament and more than 75% of the Old Testament. Tyndale truly was an amazing man, greatly used by God. Did you know that in 1631 a publishing company published a Bible with the typo, "Thou shalt commit adultery"? Only 9 of these Bibles, known as the Sinner's Bible, exist today. The shortest version in the Bible is John chapter 11 verse 35, which states, "Jesus wept." The shortest chapter in the Bible is Psalm 117, with just 2 verses. China is not only the largest producer of textiles and manufactured goods in the world, but the country is also the largest producer of Bibles. The last word in the Bible is Amen. Bob Marley was buried with a stalk of marijuana, his red Gibson Les Paul guitar, and a Bible. Gods of the Bible, Baal or Baal. Who was Baal? Baal was the name of the supreme god worshipped in ancient Canaan and Phoenicia. The practice of Baal worship infiltrated Jewish religious life during the time of the Judges and became widespread in Israel during the reign of Ahab. The word Baal means Lord. The plural is Baalim. In general, Baal was a fertility god who was believed to enable the earth to produce crops and people to produce children. Different regions and areas worshipped Baal in different ways, and Baal proved to be a highly adaptable god. The Canaanites worshipped Baal as the sun god and as the storm god. He is often depicted holding a lightning bolt. They also worshipped him as a fertility god who provided children. Baal worship was typically rooted in sensuality and involved ritualistic prostitution in the temples. At times, appeasing Baal required human sacrifice, usually in the form of the firstborn of the one making the sacrifice. The priests of Baal appealed to their god in rites of wild abandon, which included loud ecstatic cries and self-inflicted injury. In Matthew 12:27, Jesus calls Satan Beelzebub, linking the devil to Baal-zebub, a Philistine deity. The Baalim of the Old Testament were nothing more than demons masquerading as gods, and all idolatry is ultimately devil worship.